Good afternoon, good evening, good morning from Israel, and I'm glad to be here, happy to share our experience with you, and thank you for joining us. My name is Odeda, like Andrew present me. I'm a registered nurse, certified in emergency nursing, and I'm consulting to the General Medical Division at the Israeli Ministry of Health. And I will share with you our experience during the last few months the conflict that occurred in Israel. The General Medical Division at the Ministry of Health is responsible for health and routine work in the expanding in emergency responsible in the situation of emergencies. It includes all management and general hospitals in Israel and the EMS for routine and emergencies. General Medical Division is responsible for applying the Ministry of Health policies. In emergencies, according to the level of preparedness and ongoing situation assessment, hospital will be instructed to stop or reduce activities and ambulatory care in order to provide the care for patient and acute patient during the war. This may be related to all medical facilities in Israel, including private and general hospitals in Israel. The General Medical Division Emergency Operations Center is contact with emergency headquarters of all hospitals, and it's responsible for assigning the situation with the hospital management and supporting the hospital, providing adequate care according to their capabilities and based on their daily setup. The General Medical Emergency Operations Center is responsible for organizing the hospital and the EMS to recruit, mobilize casualties and patients, including secondary evacuation. The hospital can and may be declared as a triage hospital based on its capability. The emergency operation coordinates the function of the triage hospitals and collaborate with the Israeli Defense Force Medical Corps. That includes determining the secondary evacuation destination and transferring the method. As part of the health system preparedness for extreme situations, the General Medical Division with the Department of International Relations at the Ministry of Health and based on bilateral understanding with other countries for casualties evacuation in case of prolonged event, the Emergency Operations Center sets the priority and criteria for evacuation. For example, considering the limited burn units in Israel, in case of many burned casualties, these wounded may be evacuated to hospitals abroad. All hospitals typically work as independent entity. Still, in emergency, the General Medical Division may undertake and centralize the health system management for control and supervision. The health system work under the General Medical Division that designated all health institutions as national resources based on emergency public health regulation. This allows health services to expand emergency response and to provide medical care for acute and chronic patients at the same time. All general hospitals are constantly alert and have a mechanism for immediate response to observe at least 20% of its surge capacity. As part of the emergency preparedness policy, all general hospitals are prepared to self-supply for the first 72 hours of the war. They have a staff call-up system and can reinforce critical issues such as emergency department, ICU units, operating theater, equipment, food, etc. Mass casualty or mega mass casualty incident protocols are based on national doctrine related to the management, workforce, medical algorithm, and best practice. The national doctrine is modified to every hospital characteristic and requires periodic practice, simulation, and drills according to the identified threats. The drills are evaluated and graded, and the lesson learned process to draw conclusion and change with its necessary in case we need to change. On October 7, 2023, Israel experienced the worst terror attack. It was the deadliest terrorist attack in history in reference to the number of casualties per population. On that day, about 1,500 people were killed, 239 people were taken hostage, including 33 children. About 455 people were wounded, including foreign nations, all for 45 citizens and military sites located in the surrounding area of Gaza Strip. At least 3,000 rockets launched against Israel during the attack. The attack began about 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, with a barrage of paragliders incursion into Israel, and vehicle transported Hamas fighters branched to the Gaza-Israeli borders, attacking 2 cities, 39 settlements, 12 military bases, and other open spaces where people have been gathered, such as Re'im Nova Festival, and road number 232, that is the main road on the Israeli side of the Gaza Strip leading to the central of the country. The first 2 medical centers who received the casualties were Barzilai Medical Center, which located over there. That is a level 2 trauma center with 560 beds, and it's located in Ashkelon, that is 20 kilometers from Gaza. And Soroka Medical Center, that is a level 1 trauma center, which is over here. And it's located 40 kilometers from Gaza, and it's got about more than 1,000 beds. Due to the battle, many roads were blocked, preventing people to leave the settlement and to reaching essential places, including the nearby hospitals. October 7 was a holiday, meaning that many staff were not at the office. The Emergency Operations Center is located at the Ministry of Health offices in the center of the country and operated by the General Medical Division staff that were not at the office. Furthermore, since the sudden attack occurred during the holiday, all hospitals, like the Ministry of Health officers, worked with a minimum staff. Yet, finding out about the event magnitude and consequences was important. The Emergency Operations Center communication and information system can be swiftly activated remotely in emergency and connected remotely to all hospitals in Israel to gather information and first CTRAP. The first remote activation of the system was at 7:24, about an hour from the beginning of the attack. The Ministry of Health Chief Executive Officer and the Director of the General Medical Division arrived at the Emergency Operations Center at 8 o'clock. Most of the General Medical Division staff arrived quickly, activated all emergency operations system, and connected to all hospitals nationwide to receive CPRAT updated. At 8 o'clock, the Emergency Operations Center liaison officer arrived at MADA. MADA is the EMS of Israel, and he arrived at the dispatch in order to be the direct liaison over there. Parallel to the liaison officer present in MADA in the EMS dispatch, another officer from the Emergency Operations Center set the cooperation agreement with private ambulances companies that had already acted voluntarily on site. It was essential to ensure that there were adequately insurance in this risky situation. The Emergency Operations Center liaison officer arrived at Soroka Medical Center at 2 p.m. after receiving security clearance from the Ministry of Health security officer and got permission to travel. Because Barzilai Medical Center was near the battle zone, no liaison officer was allowed to be sent to the hospital. Liaison officers on site are essential to facilitate communication preventing process misunderstanding and saving life and time. The first casualties arrived at Soroka Medical Center at 7:37. At 8 o'clock, mass casualty incident was declared. The mass casualty incident announcement called for critical and auxiliary staff to arrive at the hospital and prepare for casualty arrival. At 9 o'clock, there were about 59 casualties in the emergency department. By 1 p.m., about 5 hours from the beginning of the MCI, 281 casualties were admitted in the emergency department. Out of them already sent to the operating theater, the rest to the department and to the intensive care units. Within 5 hours, after receiving security clearance for traveling, volunteer reinforced of works that came to the hospital. About 18 physicians, ICU surgeon, and trauma specialists, and 28 nurses volunteered, arrived to the hospital from the country center, coordinated by the Workforce Emergency Operations Center. About 5 hours after the announcement of MCI, 190 hospitalization patients were released to make room for casualties. For this purpose, private ambulances were recruited with the help of the Emergency Operations Center. At 9 p.m., the number of casualties in the hospital climbed to 572. Within 24 hours, the number of casualties admitted at Soroka Medical Center was 674. Of them, 137 casualties were critical, 131 moderate, 11 were declared dead on arrival, and 18 were declared dead while treated. About 185 casualties were transferred to another hospitals in the country. During that time, 42 alarms sounded in Beersheba, the city that the hospital located at, due to missile attack. Between them, the hospital organized itself and mobilized patients to protecting area. 250 casualties arrived on October 7 at Barzilai Medical Center. Due to the massive missile attack in the city and enormous damage to the hospital facility, Barzilai Medical Center organized itself to mobilize patients to protecting area. Just to remind you, Barzilai is located about 20 kilometers from Gaza. Additionally to the casualties flowing into the hospital, there was a mass evacuation of dead bodies who were brought from the settlements, the roads, and the open spaces by civilians in private cars, which created an overload on the hospital morgue. The government institution for forensic medicine was also overloaded, so some of the bodies were evacuated to special camp, which was operated by professional team and volunteers. Barzilai Medical Center applied to the Emergency Operations Center, requested assistance with the casualty secondary evacuation at 9 a.m. The first wave of casualties evacuation to other medical centers in the country left the hospital at 9:30 by bus, which means that the majority of them were minor injured. A large number of casualties were brought in a private vehicle in the afternoon when it was possible to leave the settlements that was blocked, the roads were blocked so far. Following the attack on the southern Israel, a major concern was related to the option of personal absence from Soroka Medical Center and Barzilai Medical Center. Some staff were absent due to leaving the combat zone and unable to reach the medical centers. Moreover, gradually, both hospitals, they realized that some of the staff living in the combat zone were killed, wounded, or taken hostages. And so were their family members. The Workforce Emergency Operations Center desk managed volunteer database to assist the hospital with staff shortage. Staff mobilization domestically is based on stakeholders' cooperation. Backup staff mobilization with few hours took place. As mentioned before, about 80 physicians and 28 nurses from other hospitals were mobilized to Soroka Medical Center. During the ongoing events, such as wartime, the Workforce Emergency Operations Center actively recruit international medical, nursing, or paramedical staff volunteer for health services and ensuring a diverse and skills workforce during the emergencies. The Workforce Emergency Operations Center identify and register those team members, the volunteers from abroad, and coordinates the designated hospital for their skills, for their work, and providing temporary work license in Israel. Fearing an escalation in the northern part of Israel, the emergency situation, the Ministry of Health instructed the hospital to prepare for potential casualty from the north parallel to the war in the south. Northern Hospital requested to identify admitted patient for secondary evacuation. The ability of hospitals to provide adequate care is estimated according to the daily CTRAP referred to the emergency operation and referred to the emergency center, and it's coordinated the secondary evacuation from the northern hospital to the center country hospital. All hospitals in Israel were requested to report on their capability on the daily CTRAP every morning at 7 a.m. and informed to be ready to absorb patients from hospitals in the north and the south. The attending physician decide about the patient's secondary evacuation to another hospital and consult with the emergency operations center. Medical needs, absorbing hospital capability, and the patient and his family consent are considered while preferring sending the patient to another hospital. Casualty evacuation operated by ambulances, helicopters, and private ambulance companies coordinated by the Emergency Operations Center. In the same time, we worked for the expanding surge capacity and mobilizing patients to protected area. In some hospitals, underground parking is used to admit patients in emergency. The parking lots are designed in advance as a protected area, including all facility needs for admission, such as oxygen, electricity, water, and other technology. The decision to stop regular activity and reduce routine work may be made locally or nationwide. In parallel, the Ministry of Health will direct the hospital to move patients to the most protected area. ICU, adult, pediatric, and neonatal, and surgical and neurosurgical beds are in a priority to mobilize to protected area. The hospital responds according to capabilities. However, it may require expanding capability in response to increased needs, such as shifting the internal department where to favorite of the surgical bed. Issue daily orders basis for the operation, and the Emergency Operations Center control evacuation destination and cooperate with the Israeli Defense Force and the Home Front Command. This includes secondary referral for efficient management of the hospital resources. The load index is the basis for casualties evacuation, consider of the total number of critical beds in related to the number of free critical beds in the hospital. The load index take into consideration the numerator, which means the total occupancy bed in the critical bed in the hospital, and the denominator, the total critical beds in the hospital in general. The load index reflects the hospital ability to treat critical casualties and potential patients during the war. This index is important in decision-making and policy-making, and it's changed according to the fight situation and requirement. Critical beds are defined by basket of resources, equipment, and dedicated staff. Therefore, the stock of critical beds in each hospital can be changed. Organization distribution of casualties hospital according to the definition of trauma center. We have the local 1 trauma center, regional trauma center, and level 1 trauma center. It's also responding according to the professional capabilities, including specialist and availability. The Ministry of Health recognized hospital as trauma center at various levels and respond according to the urgency and the injury characteristic in related to the hospital capability. The recognition of trauma center level consider procedures, the scope of care for severity trauma patient, and the scope of skills of medical and nursing team. Casualty distribution also related to the capability of the ambulance versus helicopter evacuation and secondary casualty transfer. Ambulance evacuation to the medical center will be for the nearest combat zone, and helicopter evacuation was prioritized for the central medical center. Deterioration casualty may be referred by helicopter to the nearest medical center, and physician on the helicopter may change the decision in case of casualty deterioration. It may be necessary to evacuate simultaneously from both sides from 2 areas of the war by ambulance and helicopters, and the emergency operation with the Home Front Command determine air evacuation according to the Ministry of Health directive. When considering the determined evacuation destination, we should be related to the first priority, evacuation of the level 1 trauma center to the level 1 trauma center, and then medical center proximity to the site, casualty condition or deterioration of casualty during the transfer, situation upon the casualty received in the medical center, hospital load index, transferred casualty to the medical center from another site at the same time, distribution of critical casualty among medical center only over time, and other limitations such as different weather, rain, wind, etc. The evacuation policy based on daily directive and related to the daily order are based on the above accumulated and updated data. Up to 4 urgent casualty will be transported by helicopter to a level 1 trauma center or 2 urgent casualties to another hospital. Ambulance will be carried out approximate level 1 trauma center distance from the war zone. Any event that include 5 or more urgent patients will be reported to the Ministry of Health Emergency Operations Center for reconsideration of destination. Secondary evacuation from one medical center to another center will be taken into consideration. And remember that all medical centers are considered national resources and provide parallel care to casualties and other patients. Therefore, they can be used for casualty admission and disposition. A secondary transfer strategy becomes necessary because of the overwhelming number of victims taken to Soraka Medical Center and Barzilai Medical Center. All evacuates mean, including private ambulances, are considered resources and centralized management by the Ministry of Health Emergency Operations Center. Evacuation of all hospitalized patients to prepare place for war casualties, take into consideration. Reduce the number of patients in the hospital by transferring them to community, private institution, or designated public area. Public area identified by the Home Front Command are equipped in advance for use as a secondary hospitalization space, preliminary for mostly for chronic patients. Casualty evacuation from the primary receiving medical center related mostly to triage hospital, and activation of the command for airplane evacuation, and the secondary transfer including prisoners and humanitarian patients in the hospitals. Prisoners and humanitarian patients are treated in a designated admitting facility. If necessary, when advanced medical care is required and impossible to provide it in that location, the patients are transferred to another medical center according to a justice table. There is a need for registration and tracking the casualty route in and out of the hospital to locate the casualty in any given moment. This is an example of casualty evacuation report by our ambulance services by the EMS, and it includes secondary evacuation from Barzilai Medical Center and Soroka Medical Center to the Israeli other located hospital. The ambulance services, the Israeli EMS, transfer at least 600 casualties to the hospitals located in Israel itself, in the center of the country. Thus, patient was registered in the ADAM system, which is casualty registration system that's located in all hospitals, and this is a national-wide system. It's managed by the hospital social worker. It's included input data that registered by the clerk in the emergency department, and it has multi-central system. The quick registration in the system allowed for creation an accurate picture of the situation in real time and can lead the previous treatment. There is an input-output system, and rapid registration allows gathering demographic data and allow tracking of casualties movement and location them in the hospital while transferring for another hospital. There is an online data simultaneously. The National Spread Network creates a picture can be referred to other hospitals and the headquarters. Updating data in head or kept current information. Casualty evacuation report through ADAM system, as you can see here. We found out that all that mentioned above was irrelevant because due to the magnitude of the event, there was no way to follow up and to update the data in real time, and we missed a lot of information. On October 7, 2023, Israel experienced the worst terror attack in its history. The attack posed many professional challenges to the health system, including overload hospitals management and patient casualty evacuation. The main factor influenced the decision to transfer casualties to another hospital was availability of ambulances and helicopters. The medical condition of the casualties set the priority for evacuation from battle zone and primary hospitals to distant hospital. Missing and inaccurate information affected the decision-making process and a local and national level and impact on the medical center capabilities, including medical performance and availability of staff. In a chaotic situation, there was no capability to monitor all casualties identification, arrival, disposition, and mobilization. Some casualties were not registered, and others listed were not updated. So the listed were not reliable. Other registers in two hospitals after being mobilized from one hospital to another, and the list were not updated. The existing Adam system is outdated and cannot provide the updated information in extreme events such as the ones that we experience. It is necessary to improve the casualties flow in and out of the hospital. The existing ABAT system must be updated and refreshed. There is a national need to obtain casualties individual information to manage the emergency admission system. There is a legal issue related to casualty identifications that need to be solved with the legal department of the Ministry of Health because individual information cannot be distributed due to the patient privacy law. Identification of casualties is significant in hospital and at the Forensic Medicine Institute. And the lack of space and personnel emphasizes the need of empower this field. The presence of the emergency liaison officer in the hospital is undoubtable. It's helped to solve ad hoc problem and help to provide and promote whatever needed in order to provide the accurate and update medical care. I would like to thank to Dr. Sigali Verantab, the head of the medical division at the Ministry of Health, and Katya Kyle from the Division of Health in order that they gave us the data. Thank you.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Donald Donahue. I'm the president of WADM, and I have the great privilege currently of reading. We've got a couple of really fascinating questions that I will pose to Dr. Benin-Goren. First one's actually, and I'm going to address them in the order that they were submitted. So the first one is actually a multi-part question. Given the range of casualties there, how are the pediatric casualties addressed? Was there a special consideration for them, and how were they managed?
We know that we did have some pediatric patient, and the treatment of pediatric patient was divided between the pediatrician and the trauma specialist. So the trauma specialist was the one who leads the treatment, but the pediatrician was the one who monitoring and provided the treatment. Additionally to this, we have to remember that our emergency department have emergency medicine specialists, and this was include also pediatric emergency medicine specialists. So they are all work together, leading by the trauma surgeon.
Thank you. And actually, a couple of people have asked this next question. Could you speak to the mental health aspect? Trauma counseling, psychological, and particularly with the issue, it ties both of those, the prior question and this question, mental health counseling, and then reunification and dealing with families who were looking for their loved ones.
Okay. Obviously, we focused at the beginning, and the first who came to the hospital were the critical and moderate injured. Less minor injured arrived at the beginning. So it's allow us to focus on life-saving procedures. Those who came mostly with stress reaction and stress symptom mobilized to another site in the hospital and supported by the psychiatrist and the social worker and psychologists that are qualified for this matter. No doubt that they need to continue, and they still continue with support in later stage after they evacuate from the hospital site. The other issue that was very important is dealing with the families that came to look for the dearest. And you have to remember that those two hospitals that received the patient at the beginning were under missile attack. So even then at the beginning, family did not arrive. Only when they feel secure, and most of the time later in the afternoon, family member arrived. And the social workers, those who activate the ADAM system, are also responsible for the information center for the families. The information center located in different sites of the hospital, which in a way isolated the families. They meet the social workers there, and they try to help them to look for the dearest. The advantages of ADAM system, although it didn't well function in this event, is that it's connected to all hospitals in Israel. So even if patient was registered and mobilized to another hospital, the social worker in the same hospital that the family member came to could locate him, as long as it was registered in a good way.
Okay, lots of great questions. I'll take this somewhat out of sequence here. Both in the pre-hospital and hospital, was there a consistent triage model? And if it was, what was it?
In the hospital, there was a triage model, yes. At the parking lot of the ambulances, there was a triage officer in both hospitals and refers the patient to the right wing of the emergency department. On site, there was few issues. One, there was no triage in the area of the missile attack because people just grabbed the injured from the site. Most of the people were local citizens, not professional, and they brought them to a certain point that over there the ambulances stay. And then there was a triage by the ambulances paramedics, and they refer the casualties, the majority of them, to the nearest hospital, which was Zilai and Soroka Medical Center. And as we mentioned in the presentation, due to the patient condition, it might be changed, and they may refer to one hospital and another. And the majority of the relatively minor patient may be referred to faraway hospitals.
Thank you. Okay, before I move on to a staff utilization question, if you triage, somebody asked, if you triaged in the parking lot and you used the parking lot for care, what did you do with the cars that were the vehicles in the parking lot?
Yeah, it's a problem, and many times it can be a problem. The majority of the triage was with ambulances. So the ambulances unload the patient and move back. And there is in both hospitals, the triage, the parking lot is located as a surrounding area, so there's no problem to go from it's a one-way flow. He's going from one side, move to the other. When there are many people who came by private car, and many times the security officer evacuated the private car from the parking lot, especially if an injured person arrived by himself and left the car in the parking lot. So the officers of the hospital, the security officers, took the car and evacuated to a certain area in the hospital.
Thank you. Let's speak to, or ask you to speak to, healthcare workers other than the nurses, the techs, and the physicians. And this question specifically asks about like physiotherapists and rehab staff. How were they utilized? Were they utilized? If so, how? And what function do those ancillary, I hate to use the word ancillary, but ancillary staff members, what do they contribute? How are they used?
Well, if you take those people like the physiotherapist and lab worker are important in their place, but physiotherapists and other clerk, they can use as clerks, they can use as assistant to the nurses, and because only in a later stage they will have to use their professional skills. So many of the hospital team arrive to the hospital, and they use as the ones who carry stretchers, because the inflow of the patient was such an high that they need more and more people to carry stretchers, either in the hospital, but also in between the department and out of the hospital. So they used to help the medical staff in their job.
Okay. The next question is, I'll give a two-part question, and they're kind of related. At what point did the medical center start to see a second wave of care demands for those deferred for care, initially deferred for care initially at the hospital? Or a secondary question is related is other complex like dialysis patients, people with continuing needs. When was that impact felt in the medical center, and how was it addressed?
Well, there are two things. One, the acute phase was related to injuries that brought from the field. And in that time, the majority of the hospital staff focus on them. In the same time, you have to remember that there were patients admitted in the hospital and they needed the continuation of the treatment. So those patients were treated by the staff in the department, and only in a later stage, as I mentioned before, those patients who could be evacuated from the hospital sent out back home or moved to another hospital. Patients who require, for example, dialysis, the dialysis continue working. We didn't need the dialysis unless sporadic cases for the victims of the event itself, but the regular acute care for patients continue to be provided by the hospital staff as usual.
Okay, and that really is a good segue to the next question. You talked about sending patients to other facilities, evacuating patients. How is that done? How were you able to move that many patients in such a short period of time in the middle of confusion?
So I think it was really a national effort, because like I said, a private ambulance was recruited through the Emergency Operations Center, and they helped to mobilize patients from one hospital to another all over the country. From the sites that observed injured from the event, we evacuate patients either by helicopters, Army helicopter, as well as the EMS helicopters, and by ambulances, either private or public. So it depends on the patient condition. Critical patients have been evacuated by helicopters. If they needed to be evacuated to level 1 trauma that's located in the center of the country, it could be done through through the emergency medical services helicopters or through the Army helicopters that cooperated all the time with the Ministry of Health.
And expand on that, a different question. How is that, who does that coordination and how is it coordinated?
The coordination went through the Emergency Operations Center at the Ministry of Health, which means that if a hospital wants to evacuate, to have a secondary evacuation, they will phone to the Emergency Operations Center, will update them. What do they want? What is the condition? How many patients need to be evacuated? And we are the one in the Emergency Operations Center refers them to the hospital according to the data that accumulated in the Emergency Operations Center. This is when you have a secondary evacuation. When it's occurred through the field, when the military helicopter evacuate patient from the war zone, the information referred to the home front command base, and they refer it to the Ministry of Health Emergency Operations Center. We designated the hospital for the helicopter to be landed and refer the helicopter to this place. As I mentioned before, the decision may be changed according to different conditions. If the patient may deteriorate on board, or if the physician on the helicopter decide that he needs to go to another hospital, we respect it. He just have to inform us to be updated. But the decision will be upon his medical decision.
Thank you. I'm going to combine 3 questions here into one because they're all the same topic. When hundreds of casualties showed up within minutes and hours, how did the hospitals deal with blood, medicines, supply, with the supply issue? How is that managed?
So, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, every hospital in Israel, according to our regulation, need to be ready for self-supply for the first 72 hours of war or any emergency, which means that you have supplies of medication, liquid, food, whatever needed. The blood bank have extra blood units in every hospital blood bank, and the national blood bank located in the center of the country recruited in case of needed more blood unit in ad hoc in real time. So there is no problem to mobilize blood from the national blood bank to any hospital because there is no problem, it's a national spread. And furthermore, the cooperation with the Army helicopter is that we provide blood units to the Army helicopter if needed, when they land in the hospital and bring patient there. So there was no problem of shortage of blood. In very quickly time, Israeli citizens donated more blood because there is a lot of awareness to this issue. And this was not the main problem, really, not related to blood or any other equipment, medication, etc.
Okay, I'm mindful of the time. I will combine one or two, maybe two and a half more questions. Neurosurgical recovery, rehabilitation, how is that process? How do you account for that need, that workload, and how are the hospitals handling that?
Neurosurgery department received neurosurgeon patient, but not all the department with the amount of patients that we have. Maybe if the patient was a multi-trauma injured patient, including neurosurgeon and other trauma cases, he may be admitted to the intensive care units. Recovery department, when we say recovery department, the meaning is a post-operative recovery. It means that we use the intensive care unit, so-called. It's a post-operative care as an intensive care unit. It's not the recovery for a long time. This is something different, that it's work in every hospital. We have a recovery department. But right now, in this situation of the acute phase, we use the post-operative recovery unit as an intensive care unit. But still, we use only 70% of it because we always kept space for other patients that may need urgent operation and need to be in the recovery units.
Excellent. My half question is, and I think I would know the answer, the recalling or the surge of staff coming in to serve the hospital. I'm assuming, and the question is, I'm assuming there was some call out, but also that people showed up just because they were aware that was an incident. Is that true?
Yes. This is very much unique to the Israeli medical staff.
Okay.
Since we have previous experience with mass casualty incident, and although we have a well-organized call-up system in all our hospitals, the Israeli medical staff familiar and in the moment with this, and in the moment that they hear in the news, in the broadcast, in the social media, that there is some kind of mass casualty incident occurred, they even don't wait for the call-up system. They immediately come to the hospital. So the majority of the hospital didn't have a shortage of personnel. The shortage of personnel was mostly related to the hospitals in the war zone, Barzilai Medical Center mostly, because they were close to the area of war, and because many of their personnel were and lived in the area of war. So, but the same problems that we have there is that we couldn't send backup system, at least at the beginning, at the first day of the war. At Soroka Medical Center, when it was far away, a little bit more far away, as I explained, the security officer allowed medical staff and nursing staff to come and back up them, and a lot of volunteers from other hospitals in the country, right, came to the hospital.
Okay, and my last question will be actually two-part, combine two questions, and I'm going to read the first one verbatim here. I've read that forensic issues were hampered by both the number of fatalities and the religious requirements for rapid burial, which is common across the cultures there. This has made judicial investigations difficult. Any thoughts on how these conflicting interests can be reconciled when disasters occur?
Yeah, well, we have one national forensic medicine in Israel, which unfortunately it's not big enough to absorb this kind of event. We don't have enough forensic medical team. We don't have enough space over there. So one issue was to evacuate the bodies to a local place, to a fit place. And that's why they opened a special camp not far away in the south that observed all these bodies. And it's operated by volunteers, mostly dental doctors and some pathologists who lead the care of the bodies over there, additionally to the work that's done in the National Forensic Institute. And they were working and backed up by volunteers from what we call Zaka. Zaka is a ultra-Orthodox group that have the capability and the knowledge of how to treat the bodies, how to keep the bodies part, because they base on the concept that according to the Judaism, it's important to bring all part of the bodies to buried. And that's why it's important to keep the bodies and treat them. So Zaka volunteers were the one who collect the body from the site or the part of the body from the site, brought them to the camp that pick up the bodies over there and work with the dentist and the pathologist that volunteer working there to identify the bodies. Some of the bodies could be identified because the majority of us served in the army, and in those who were serving the army have a DNA protocol there. Other citizens that didn't serve in the army was much more difficult to identify there. And for that, the Israeli police forces established a headquarters that families that were looking for the dearest and didn't find them as an injured referred to this headquarters supported by police forces, and DNA was taken over there in order to compare it to the bodies that kept in the camp.
Thank you. Okay, and my final question, and I'll apologize. I've tried to combine the questions and cover everybody's inquiry, which we could probably spend another hour on this call. Summarize what do you think are the lessons learned here? What message going forward that the audience and indeed disaster medicine people in general should know?
Well, I think that the most important thing, obviously, is to attach to medical protocols when it's providing medical care. But when it's come to the management, it's important to define each member, so-called, of the colleagues, to know what their work is, who is responsible for what, who is refers the information, and the way we gather the information. Because we found out that the majority misunderstanding was because we didn't have accurate information, because of the overload situation, because the information came through different way, and because we couldn't understand what's happened at the beginning of the event. So information is very important, taking into consideration management the event, because it impacts the medical care, it impacts the availability of service, it impacts the coordination of the headquarters, and it impacts the relationship between different agencies involved, like the civil authorities in the army and civil authorities and the army medical corps.
I thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ben-Gurion.